All right. Tonight's lesson in learning to read biblical Hebrew, we're going to look at the letters He, Vav, and Zion. And let me get back here to there we go. These are the, let's see, fifth, sixth, and seventh letters of the Hebrew alphabet. And these lessons are designed to help students recognize the letters visually, pronounce them correctly, understand their grammatical function, to learn historically grounded messages, primarily from Jewish and academic sources, with the lean toward academic. And also to see how Hebrew letters contribute depth and texture to the language of Scripture. So, an important foundation. Before we begin, it's important to understand how we are approaching the meanings of the Hebrew letters. Ancient Hebrew letters originally developed from pictographic forms, and I think Rabbi Jay has made a very good point that Joseph probably was a father of the writing of Hebrew, and he would have taken the pictographs of the Egyptian language and transformed them into letter depictions. Rather than depicting ideas, they depicted sounds, and then those sounds could be put together in a way that they could transfer their spoken language, excuse me, by writing it down. We get, if it wasn't Joseph, by all means, it was Moses. But I think by the time of Moses, it was already in a written form, where the language had primarily been an oral language before that. There are some good ideas that come from the rabbinic literature on the letters. Medieval commentators, scribal traditions, later mystical writings, although we'll not get into that a lot. But there's some insights into the letters that help us gain a deeper meaning of the Torah if we use them properly. However, some modern Hebrew roots and Messianic teachings make claims that cannot be historically verified. That doesn't mean necessarily that they're not true. They're just not accepted. Some of the ideas that are put out there, and believe me, there's so many on the internet that it boggles the mind. Many of these symbolic interpretations are devotional rather than linguistic. And I want to distinguish between the historical evidence, traditional interpretation, and later mystical reflection. So in these lessons, we're focusing primarily, not completely, but primarily on verifiable linguistic information. I think that should be our foundation. And then building on it, traditional Jewish sources, grammatical function, and literary and theological depth grounded in the scriptures, primarily the Tanakh. We may occasionally mention mystical or symbolic traditions, but we'll do so carefully, and hopefully I will do it responsibly. So I'm not going to write on the whiteboard. I put that in there for a note for myself, but we have already looked at the letters Aleph, Bet, and Vet, the Gimel, the Dalet, and tonight we'll be looking at the Hey, Vav, and the Zion, and reading from right to left as Hebrew is. So this progression is not strict doctrine. I've seen so many memes online that says this is what this means. Well, that might be what it means to you, and that's fine. But to say this is what it means is something different. It's a teaching framework that helps us as students to remember the letters and to reflect on patterns that's found in Hebrew thought. So we learned in our first lesson of the consonants that the aleph has the idea of source, strength, and beginning. The bet has the idea of a house or a dwelling, a tent. We go into the gimel, and it has the idea of movement or provision because the gimel historically was connected with the camel, which was the primary method of moving goods from one area to another. The letter Dalet uh, is a door or pathway. And Hey has the idea of revelation or expression. We'll see later the symbol of the man with the upraised arms. Uh, the Vav has the idea of connection or joining, and we'll talk about that. I talk about that a little bit in my little video on the letter Vav and how to write it. The Zion has the idea of action or purpose. So, one possible conceptual flow is the source, a dwelling is formed, movement and provision begin, access and entry appear, revelation and breath emerge, things become connected, and purposeful actions follow. So we can see the progression of the letters of the alphabet actually kind of paint a picture for us. So let's look at the letter He. It has a soft sound like the H, and it's like a breath out. Some examples of words using the Het, especially those beginning the word Het. I'm sorry, He. I wanted to say Het, and that's not right. It's He. Is Har. We learned that the Pathak has the A sound, Har. A mountain is the meaning of that word. And then the word Hine, behold. Again, drawing back on the idea behind the word He or the letter He. And then the letter He functions in a special way at the end of words. It can become very soft at the end of words, and it can become silent. And when the Masoretes devised a system at the end of the word when the letter He was supposed to be accentuated, they would put a dot inside of it. And this told the person reading the text, as he was reading it out loud, I really need to make that Hey at the end prevalent. And I used the example before of the word salvation, Yeshua. And when we compare that to the Messiah's name, Yeshua, you can see there is a slight difference. They're connected together, so we don't want to separate the concept of them, but they're two distinct words. And so the Masoretes put that dot in the Hey at the end, which is not there in the name of the Messiah and the name of Joshua, as we call him. So it functions mainly as a vowel marker. And we talked about in the vowels, we talked about the matrix lectionis, the mothers of reading. And so the he would be a mater lectionis. When people saw, when the Hebrew readers would see the letter he at the end of a word, it symbolized that it was, first of all, it was a female, a feminine noun. So therefore, you had to put feminine pronouns, verbs, and etc. with it in speaking the language. The word Torah and the word Malcha. Torah, of course, we know what that is. And then the Malcha is queen. And in the ancient Paleo form, and again, I want to stress that Paleo Hebrew is not a separate language. It's what I consider similar to a font. It's a script that's used, and no matter what script it is in, it still has that h sound to it. So the ancient form most likely represented a window or an opening, a person expressing breath. When we breathe out, especially if we breathe out heavily, we have that sound that comes out. And it would have looked like this. This is the earliest form here, the man with his arms upraised. And then later it became this. And eventually languages change, and through the many different changes, we come up with the letter H today. Many scholars associate the letter with the idea of revelation, showing, expression, and breath. And this association fits well with Hebrew grammar because he frequently marks things that become identifiable or revealed. It's used as the definite article. It changes Torah being a Torah, an instruction, to HaTorah, the instruction. In the block script that we use today, it has this form here. And I'll show in my little video here in a minute why that it's important to put that shape the way it is. It almost looks like a dalet and a yud. And I don't know if there's a significance with that. I didn't find anything. So I'm sure somebody found something, but whether it's accurate or not, that's another question. Like I say, with the internet, the great thing about the internet is there's so much information out there. The bad thing about the internet is there's so much information out there, and we have to weed ourselves through it. So this form here distinguishes it from the letter chet. We can notice the distinction right there. The opening matters. Jewish scribal tradition pays close attention to this distinction because even small changes can alter a meaning. We talked about that with the letter Aleph. And when the letter Aleph is in a name or a word, and that Aleph is switched out for an ayin, the ayin is of lesser value. So that person or that thing is exhibiting a lesser value for some reason. And so the scribal tradition was to really pay attention to those little changes, look at the context, see what you can find. As I said, the grammatical functions of hey are it functions as a definite article. It's equivalent to the English word the. Ha-melech means the king. Melech is king. Ha-melech is the king. And this is extremely important in biblical Hebrew. Hebrew normally does not use separate words like a and the. Instead, the prefix he will mark the definiteness of a word. So that's where the argument over whether is it a beginning or the beginning in Bereshit. And there's some rules that go in the grammar, and we'll talk about that later, that allow it to be a definite, even though the he is not there. It's also a directional he. It can indicate at the end of a word, ha beta would be translated as toward the house. Habet or habayit would be the house. Habaita is toward the house. So when we see that later on, as we learn to read from the Torah scrolls, we'll know that letter he on the end makes it directional. And this is sometimes called the he locale. It appears frequently in the Tanakh. And finally, as I mentioned a little bit earlier, the final he functions as a mater lectionis. It indicated vowel sounds. The comets has the ah sound. So the comets hey would be ah, a little bit more accentuated. You got ah and ah. Then the sego has the eh sound. And so you have eh. And then the tsere has the a sound. And so you would have eh. And then the holum, the o sound, ho. So this becomes increasingly important as Hebrew spelling developed. Originally they just used the matrix lectionis. Then they come up with the vowel symbols that we see here underneath, the comets, the hey, or I should say the comets, the segol, the tsere, and the cholam. So hey, looking at hey in Jewish thought, there's a divine name connection. The letter he appears twice in the Tetragrammaton, Yud he, Vav he. Because of this, Jewish tradition sometimes associates the he with revelation, divine breath, creation, and mercy. It's the voice of the Creator coming out and revealing to us and putting the divine breath within us and creating and speaking mercy to us. Some rabbinic traditions connect the breathly nature of he with the life-giving breath of the Almighty. And also Genesis 2:7. Also, it says there, the Almighty breathed into Adam the breath of life. So there's that connection that they make. And while we should avoid overstatement, the association between breath and he is deeply rooted in Jewish tradition. That's why some people are starting to say now, in this craze to be able to pronounce the name. They're saying, well, it's all breath out, breathing in and breathing out. It's a normal breathing that we do. And I think that's oversimplifying it a bit and kind of emphasizing some things overdoing things. The gematria, which is using numbers associated with letters. The numerical value of the he is 5. It's the 5th letter of the alphabet. And in the Jewish tradition, the number 5 is associated with the 5 books of Torah, revelation, and instruction. And we can see that the 5 books of the Torah were inspired or breathed from the Almighty to Moshe and Yehoshua at the very end of Deuteronomy. So this is traditional symbolism rather than linguistic proof. Some word connections. We gave Hane a while ago. The meaning is behold. Haya, he was or he became. The became would be when we add the vav on front of it. Vayahi. He became. Haya is simply he was. And I think I might have mentioned last week that when you look up a Hebrew verb in the lexicons, it will always be in the third person singular in the lexical form. This is just the way that Hebrew works. English uses infinitives. To be. In Hebrew, it's he was. He often appears in words involving visibility, declaration, or manifestation. The word that I used in my little video for the letter he was who. And I jokingly said at the end of that it reminds me of Abbott and Costello. Who is he? Who was on first base? He was on first base. So that kind of helps us understand it. So in reflection, he reminds us that biblical faith is not merely internal. What is hidden eventually becomes visible. Speech reveals our thoughts. Actions reveal our character. Breath equals speech equals revelation. They're so closely connected in Hebrew thought.